The moment Harold stepped into the sleek glass, walled conference room of the Stratcom global headquarters, the air seemed to stiffen, not out of respect, but out of awkward dismissal. The room was filled with sharp-dressed executives in tailored suits, digital displays humming behind them, coffee cups steaming beside futuristic notepads. The old man looked painfully out of place in his faded brown bomber jacket, loose slacks, and scuffed leather boots. His white hair, neatly combed but thinned by time, framed a face lined not by age alone but by stories no one here had asked to hear. "Who's the fossil?" A young voice muttered from the far end of the table. It was Jeremy Lang, the 34-year-old director of tech strategy, who made no effort to lower his voice. A ripple of muffled chuckles spread through the room. "That's Colonel Harold Everett," replied a nervous intern named Page, who stood by the door holding a folder. "Retired. Served 32 years. Invited by Mr. Dalka himself." Dalka invited him. Jeremy raised an eyebrow, amused. "He still thinks old war stories are good for morale." "Colonel Everett," boomed a deep voice from the head of the table. "Glad you could join us." The speaker was Victor Dalka, CEO of Stratcom, a war tech firm contracted by multiple nations for defense strategy. His salt and pepper beard and commanding presence gave him the air of a modern general, even though he'd never worn a uniform. Harold nodded stiffly. "Happy to be here. No need to stand." Dalka gestured to an empty chair. "We're discussing fail-safes for field operations in remote zones. Thought your insight could be useful if you're up to it." "Field operations," Jeremy smirked, with respect. "We're talking about quantum encrypted comm links, not trench warfare." "I'm aware," Harold replied calmly. "But even modern soldiers bleed like the old ones did, and they panic the same way when plans fail." An uncomfortable silence fell. A few eyes rolled. Dalka cleared his throat. "Let's proceed. Jeremy, walk us through the new B3 protocol schematic." Jeremy tapped his watch, and a holographic grid flared to life in the center of the table, outlining a sleek comms system designed to auto-scramble in case of signal interception. He spoke in sharp bursts, full of jargon and acronyms. "As you see, it reroutes via nanosat relays, self-destructs after 45 seconds if compromised. We've added a biometric handshake to avoid unauthorized triggers. Fail-safes built in at 3 separate algorithmic layers." He finished with a flourish. "Even if you're caught in hostile territory, the system ensures no data breach." Harold leaned forward. "And what happens if the satellites are taken out? If the weather jams the signal? If your biometric reader fails because your hand's burned or bleeding?" Jeremy blinked, lips parting slightly. "We have contingencies." "No," Harold said. "You have code, and code dies in the mud." The tension thickened. Dalka's eyes narrowed. "Go on, Colonel." Harold's voice was quiet but clear. "I was in Kunar province in '85. Night op. Intel said the valley was clear. 5 of us hiked in. 3 hours later, we were pinned by snipers, and the comms were dead, some kind of magnetic interference we didn't predict. Our leader was hit in the neck. Blood everywhere. I was second in command." "Forgive me," Jeremy interrupted, "but that was 40 years ago." Harold ignored him. "We had to think fast. I drew on an old strategy I learned from a Romanian unit back in '78. No tech, just signals. If separated, we were to draw circles in the dirt with a line through it, mentor group here at sundown. If you were wounded, you left 3 dots of blood near the sign. If you were captured and escaped, you etched a triangle with the point broken off. That's primitive." Another exec mumbled. "It saved all 5 of us," Harold said, "because we had something beyond tech. We had a human fallback. We knew how to survive when everything else went dark. Dalka looked intrigued. And you think this has relevance now? I know it does, Harold said. I've trained young soldiers who froze when the touchscreen didn't work, who panicked when the GPS lost signal. They didn't know what to do without instructions lighting up their helmets. We're building warriors who depend on battery life. You want us to program fear into the software, Jeremy scoffed. I want you to remember that soldiers don't die from failed tech. They die from failed thinking. A silence spread. Dalka stood. Jeremy shut off the schematic. But sir, now. The hologram vanished. Dalka walked around the table. Colonel Everett just reminded me why I invited him. We are so consumed with making soldiers invincible with tools. We've forgotten to make them adaptable with instincts. He turned to the group. Every one of you is tasked with adding a human fail safe to your systems. Something analog, something physical, a fallback plan, a scared, bleeding soldier can use when everything else fails. A voice spoke up from the back. It was Paige, the intern. Like a universal sign language, or etched codes and field manuals. Harold smiled. Exactly. Jeremy frowned, clearly still unconvinced. This feels regressive. Harold stood, slowly, hands on the table. Son, I've seen boys with Ivy League degrees cry in a ditch because their drone got jammed. I've seen a farm kid with nothing but a knife and a mirror get his whole unit out alive. Which one do you want carrying your protocol? Jeremy didn't answer. Dalka did. Effective immediately. Colonel Everett will consult on the Human Instinct Initiative. Paige, draft the contracts. Jeremy, you'll report to him for integration oversight. What? Jeremy's face turned red. You can't be serious. I've never been more. Dalka said coldly. Meeting adjourned. The room began to empty. Some execs nodded respectfully at Harold on the way out. Others avoided his gaze. Paige lingered, her eyes shining with excitement. That story about the triangle, she asked. Did that really happen? Harold nodded. Still got the rock I carved it into. Keeps me grounded. I'd love to hear more, she said. Maybe even record some of them for the training modules. He looked at her, surprised, then chuckled. You're the first one to ask in years. As she walked him toward the elevator, the halls felt different, less sterile, less dismissive. By the time the elevator doors closed, Harold wasn't just an old man with shaky hands anymore. He was a lifeline to the grit, blood, and brilliance forgotten in the age of algorithms. And, as soldiers around the world would soon learn, when the satellites fall and the screen goes dark, the survival of a unit may still depend on a circle in the dirt and a broken triangle drawn with a trembling hand. Harold sat by the wide glass window in the conference lounge as the sun dropped low across the skyline, casting long shadows over Stratcom's towering building. His coffee had gone cold, untouched. He wasn't one for sipping lattes, but he needed a moment to breathe, to absorb, to feel the weight of something shift inside him. For years, he had been dismissed, smiled at politely, then ignored. But today, he'd cracked the silence. The lounge door swung open, and Paige stepped in, carrying a slim black folder. Colonel Everett, she said softly. He looked up. Mr. Dalka wants a formal outline by next week, she said. Your Human Instinct Initiative. He wants it packaged and ready for review by the board. Also, she hesitated, then smiled. He wants you to lead it. Harold raised an eyebrow. Lead it. Yes, sir, she said, cheeks flushing. You'd have a full department. Resources, even training authority if you need it. They're building a new wing. You'll have an office with a view. He chuckled. I haven't had an office since 1997. Back then, it was a converted supply closet with a flickering light bulb and a chair that leaned left. Well, Paige smiled. This one has leather chairs and touchscreen walls, but I think we can request a flickering bulb if that helps you think." He laughed, a deep, aged sound that echoed like worn gravel. "No need. I think better in silence." As she handed him the folder, he caught her gaze. "Tell me." "Paige, why are you helping me?" She blinked. "Because I believe you. My brother's in the army. Third year. Last week, his squad's comms went down during a joint exercise. They panicked. He said it was chaos. They've been trained on everything except what to do when nothing works. That's dangerous." Harold's fingers curled slowly around the folder. "Then we have work to do." The next few weeks were a blur of motion, meetings, and sudden attention. Where once Harold had been the ghost in the hallway, he was now the man executives waited for. Specialists flew in from around the globe to consult with him. Rooms that once scoffed now listened in rapt silence as he stood by whiteboards covered in red marker sketches of mud signals, broken trail markers, body language, and instinctive field tactics. "Every man and woman must be trained, not just in gear," he told the room during a briefing, "but in gut." In one session, a young tactical software developer raised his hand. "Sir, why can't we just embed voice recognition fallback systems in every helmet? Because when you're choking on smoke," Harold replied, "your voice might not be there, but your hands will be. Your brain will be, if we teach it." He shared stories, not as entertainment, but as curriculum. Stories like the time his team used bits of mirror shards to relay silent Morse code across hills during an ambush. Or how, in Sarajevo, a soldier survived 7 days behind enemy lines because she remembered an old code they taught in Ranger School: 3 taps, pause, 1 tap, repeat, alive, hidden dot wait. His strategies weren't in any textbook. They were born of desperation, of survival, of lessons paid in blood. And slowly, those in suits started taking notes. But not everyone was convinced. On a rainy Thursday morning, Harold entered a smaller briefing room for a final pre-launch approval. Jeremy Lang sat at the table, flanked by 2 board members and a private consultant named Dr. Renee Kalmar, a former NATO systems analyst. Jeremy folded his arms. "We've reviewed the initiative. Colonel Everett, it's colorful, but redundant. Soldiers today aren't going into the field without drones, AI companions, satellite links. They won't always have them." Harold interrupted. "That's the point." Dr. Kalmar leaned in. "Colonel, you're proposing we integrate 1980s era strategies into the 2040 battlefield. You're suggesting soldiers learn how to write in mud while flying an AI-piloted craft." Harold stared at him. "I'm suggesting they learn how to survive when everything breaks. I've buried men who died waiting for their tech to reboot." Kalmar was silent. Jeremy pushed forward. "We have no data that suggests these ancient tactics have application in modern warfare, because your data starts after the first bullet flies," Harold said. "But war begins in the silence before the comms die. The panic, the breath, the instincts. That's where you either survive or freeze." The room quieted. One of the board members, an older woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes, spoke. "Colonel, give us a scenario. One where your methods would outperform ours." Harold nodded slowly. "I'll give you a true one. 10 years ago, a joint operation in a Central Asian corridor, classified. A convoy with encrypted SAT gear was moving toward an extraction point. They got ambushed. EMP blast took out everything comms. Nav, drone support. Their captain froze. He'd never trained for nothing. Soldiers scattered. Half were captured. 3 died in a minefield they walked into, trying to navigate by dead reckoning. He leaned in, voice firm. Now, imagine that same team had learned signal markings, had planned fallback paths using terrain signs, rock codes, even scent markers. They'd have regrouped, moved silently, escaped through the ravine just east of the blast zone. I've seen it done, and they'd all be alive. Dr. Kelmar looked down. Jeremy tapped his pen. The board member nodded. You have 1 month. We'll fund phase 1. But if we don't see integration results or soldier feedback by then, it's shut down. Harold stood, saluted her not out of obligation, but of old habit. You'll see it. Over the next weeks, Harold personally led field simulations. He designed obstacle courses not built around tech but failure. Comms down, drone destroyed, no GPS, only instincts, only each other. Young recruits were baffled at first, then shaken, then focused. Sir, one private gasped after completing the blind escape course. I've trained 3 years, and this scared me the most. Good, Harold said. Now you're ready. 1 week before the phase I deadline, an emergency report came in. A Stratcom test unit deployed in Eastern Africa for a joint peacekeeping exercise had been caught in a flash ambush. Their drones were shot down. The terrain was flooded. Comms failed. HQ braced for casualties. But the report ended differently. All 12 soldiers survived, regrouped via field markers carved into tree trunks and sand trails, extracted via emergency flank route, used fallback codes taught in the HI protocol. No fatalities. The news hit Stratcom like a thunderclap. Jeremy read the message 3 times. Silent. Dalka forwarded the report to the board with 2 words. He was right. In the next Global Security Symposium, Colonel Harold Everett stood in front of hundreds of officers, leaders, and defense strategists. His hair was white, his hands still trembled slightly, but the room was silent. My name is Harold Everett, he said. I'm 78 years old. I've served in 9 wars, bled on 3 continents, buried friends on all of them. He held up a small, tattered notebook, leather-bound, scratched. This is my real weapon. Inside are signals, maps.instinct drills. None of it needs charging, none of it needs satellites, but every single page saved a life. And now, it's saving more. He looked up. War evolves, but survival stays the same. The body breaks, the mind fears, the tech fails. But if you've trained your soul not to quit, that's when you win. The applause that followed was thunderous. Some stood, some saluted, a few wept. And back at Stratcom, Jeremy walked quietly into Harold's new office, wood-paneled. Quiet, with a view of the mountains. He cleared his throat. I just came to say I was wrong, Jeremy said, and to ask if you'd teach me that triangle symbol again. Harold smiled. Grab a chair. In the end, it wasn't the shaking hands or the faded jacket that made Harold unforgettable. It was the truth he carried. Because in the age of digital war and robotic armies, the survival of humanity still depended on one fragile thing, a heartbeat that refused to stop when everything else did. And the old man who reminded the world how to listen to it. Harold sat across from Jeremy, the same man who had once mocked him openly, now hunched over a notebook like a new recruit. The old colonel reached into his pocket and pulled out a smooth, oval-shaped rock. Its surface was worn from time and handling, but etched clearly into its face was a triangle, its point broken clean off. This, Harold said, placing it on the table between them, was the symbol I carved the night I escaped a prisoner transport during the Gulf deployment. I didn't know if anyone would find it, But someone did, and they followed the signs. 2 days later, we were all together again, starving, bleeding, but alive. Jeremy touched the rock gently. It's so simple, and that's what makes it powerful, Harold replied. When the brain is panicked, it doesn't remember complexity. It remembers shape, instinct, rhythm. Jeremy looked up, expression stripped of arrogance. I've spent my whole life building complexity. I know, Harold said softly. That's why we needed each other. The days that followed saw a complete transformation in Stratcom's internal doctrine. A new department was born under the Human Instinct Initiative. Field manuals were rewritten. Survival training courses began integrating Harold's methods, some even named after him. A simulation chamber was constructed in the lower levels of headquarters. Inside, recruits were plunged into blackout scenarios. No light, no sound, no tech, just their minds, their breath, their instincts. Harold personally trained the first class. He stood in the center of a cold, darkened field with 12 young soldiers around him, each with a canvas pack and a single piece of chalk. You're going to be dropped in this zone, he said, separated. Each of you will have one goal: to find each other again, without speaking, without gear, without GPS. You will rely only on terrain, natural signs, and the codes I taught you. Use chalk if you must. But remember, subtlety saves lives. One soldier raised his hand. Sir, what if we get it wrong? Harold nodded. Then you die. The field went quiet, and then he smiled. But I don't think you will. For 3 days, they navigated the terrain, enduring weather simulations, hunger drills, and isolation. By the end of the exercise, not only had all 12 reunited using Harold's tactics, they had also located a mock extraction point and carried out a wounded soldier using improvised stretchers. When the debrief ended, Paige, who had monitored every step from the control room, ran to Harold with tears in her eyes. They did it. They really did it. Harold just smiled and leaned on his cane. They always could. They just forgot how. But not everyone was comfortable with the shift. Major clients began asking questions. Investors worried about regression in tactics. A critical op-ed titled "Stratcom Stuck in the Trenches" gained traction online. One morning, Harold was called into Dalka's office. Victor Dalka stood by the window, arms behind his back. There's pressure, he said without turning. They want to know why we're teaching cave drawings instead of coding protocols. Harold stepped in, calm. You know why? Dalka turned to face him. I do, but they don't. And perception, Colonel, often trumps truth. Harold walked to the desk, placed a flash drive on it. Play this in your next board meeting. Dalka raised an eyebrow. What is it? Helmet cam footage, Harold said, from a unit in South America. Week ago, they lost power in a canyon during a cartel takedown. No drones, no radar, no communications. Dalka plugged it in. On screen, a soldier moved silently through dense foliage, then paused beside a small tree. Scratched faintly into the bark was a triangle with a broken point. Moments later, he veered east, found 2 teammates. They nodded, no words. Together, they crept through a ravine and flanked the enemy. Clean extraction. 0 deaths. Dalka stared. No orders given. None needed, Harold said. Just instinct. Later that month, Stratcom released a global statement. Technology wins battles, but human instinct wins wars. The statement went viral. Enlistment centers saw a spike in recruits. The military asked for full integration of Harold's curriculum across 3 branches. And Harold, he stayed the same. He refused press interviews, declined book deals, even turned down a national medal ceremony. He preferred the field, preferred teaching. But one day, as he walked down a hallway flanked by framed portraits of Stratcom's pioneers, he paused at a blank wall. Paige, walking beside him, noticed. "What's wrong?" He smiled gently. "Nothing. Just wondering if they'll put me up there one day." She laughed. "You're already up there. Every new recruit knows your story. Every soldier carries one of your codes." He looked at her, eyes shimmering faintly. "Then I suppose that's enough." Years passed. Harold's hair thinned more. His steps slowed, but he kept coming back, walking the training grounds like a silent sentinel. Soldiers stopped and saluted him everywhere he went. Then, one morning, he didn't show up. Paige was the first to find him, peacefully passed away in his armchair, a worn field journal open in his lap, pen still in hand. At his funeral, dozens spoke, veterans, recruits, commanders, even Jeremy Lang, who now led the very initiative he once mocked. But when it was Paige's turn, she walked to the podium, voice steady despite the tears. He didn't save the world with weapons or AI. He saved it by reminding us of something we all have and often forget: our will to survive, our bond with each other, and our power to endure when nothing else is left. She paused. "And when the world goes dark again, and someday it we'll find our way by his signs. We'll remember the circle, the triangle, the man." As the sun set over the cemetery, dozens of soldiers bent down, drawing silent shapes in the soil beside his grave. A broken triangle, a promise. Colonel Harold Everett was gone, but his survival had become theirs. And even in a world of machines, it was the instinct of one trembling old man that lit the path forward.